Hello, I'm Claire Smith and welcome to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking about winter gourmand perfumes, and I think winter is only really special, isn't it, in that respect, that you can choose those really sweet, really indulgent fragrances and not feel like they're just too much, because the cold really calms them down and just means that they're just a little bit more delicious in a way, a bit like food is. You always gravitate towards fattier, sugarier food when it's colder, and it's exactly the same with fragrance. So this is a tag video started by Scented Snowdrops here on YouTube, and if you haven't checked out John's channel then please do go check him out, because he is someone who has taught me so much about fragrance and who has introduced me to so many different brands and so many different perfumes, and has allowed me very generously to try a lot of his collection, and I just appreciate that so much. So please do go check out Jon Snow's channel at Scented Snowdrops here on YouTube. So John's video idea was that you pick your most gourmand fragrances. So I have got 10 in this video and I'm just going to talk you through them. So let's get on with the video. The first one I'm going to talk about is based around Marshmallow. So the fragrance is actually from Reminiscence and it's from the Les Notes Gourmand line, and it's called Gourmand. So Gourmand literally translates as marshmallow. And actually when I first bought this fragrance, I was a little bit disappointed because I felt like I wasn't smelling marshmallow, but I just was being so impatient and not allowing it to dry down. So actually when this finally dries down, you do get a strong impression of marshmallow. It just takes a while to get there. So in the opening of this fragrance, it's kind of a little bit fresh. It's kind of green, it's aromatic, almost a little bit herbal, perhaps even a little bit soapy. It has a little bit of a floral touch. It definitely has a little bit of a soft orangey feel to this fragrance as well. But actually as it dries, all of that fades a little bit and the soapiness disappears completely. You do get a little bit of that orangey feel still in the dry down. But really overall the dry down is a soft, powdery, fluffy vanilla. A really fluffy, powdery vanilla that really makes you think of marshmallows. Because really, what is a marshmallow? When you think about what a marshmallow smells like, a marshmallow smells like sugar. It smells like powdered sugar and with a touch of vanilla. And that is what this fragrance is in the dry down. It is really delicious. It's something that has a little bit of a vintage vibe about it as well. I think that's really something that is quite classic for this line. Something that makes me think of ballerinas and sort of, you know, people dressed in pink basically. Just like this bottle looks is how this fragrance kind of smells to me. I think this fragrance is something that not everybody's going to enjoy. I think if you're expecting, you know, a shop-bought, mass-produced kind of marshmallow fragrance, this is not that. This is more of an artisanal marshmallow. This is something that you feel like a chef has made you in some specialist kitchen. It's something that really makes me think as much of the marshmallow plant and marshmallow tea as it does of pink and white fluffy marshmallows. I think this fragrance is really long lasting. It's really quite strong as well. It's something you don't need a lot of. And I think because it is so long lasting, you do get those wafts of that marshmallow fragrance throughout the day. It's something that really does make you smell deliciously edible, but also quite grown up, because it just isn't that sort of mass produced marshmallow smell at all. It's something that is quite different to that. So for marshmallow, that's Reminiscence Gourmand. So the next note that I'm going to highlight is Marzipan. I absolutely love Marzipan. It's something that I can't get enough of. On cakes, I really love it in fruit cakes. It's really the layer that I want to see more than the icing. I sometimes make Christmas cakes just with Marzipan on them because I'm just not bothered by icing, but I love Marzipan. So the fragrance I'm going to choose for Marzipan is actually another one from the Reminiscence line, and it's actually Heliotrope. So Heliotrope opens with both a really fresh fig note, but also more strongly, I think, with a really fresh green almond scent. So almost like the almonds are still in their little furry jackets, those green furry jackets that almonds have when they're straight off the tree. And also when the almonds aren't quite ripe, when they're still a little bit milky, that kind of smell to them. I think this fragrance then, as it dries down, goes through various different stages. So the first stage for me is something that smells almost like a carrot cake. It's sort of a little bit warm, a little bit spiced, and very vanilla-y. And then as it dries further, the heliotrope really starts to come into its own. And the heliotrope comes off in this fragrance as a really smooth, really kind of cool smelling marzipan. And it's just gorgeous. It's just delicious. I don't know what it is about this fragrance, but there's something about it that makes me think of really whimsical things like the Nutcracker and also Alice in Wonderland. And it just makes me think that it's something the Sugar Plum Fairy would choose to wear, basically. So that's Heliotrope from the Les Notes Gourmand line from Reminiscence. So we've had two really whimsical fragrances. Now let's move on to something deeper and darker. So the next fragrance is one from Floristry and it's called Ylang Ylang Espresso. So I'm using this fragrance to represent Boozy coffee because that's what it reminds me of in the opening especially. So this fragrance in the beginning is a deep, dark, black espresso, super strong espresso coffee mixed with some alcohol, perhaps even something like a whiskey. Really, really alcoholic feeling in the opening. As this fragrance dries, the booziness fades back and it's replaced by Ylang Ylang. The Ylang Ylang here is almost a little bit trance-like. It feels a little bit hippie. It feels like somebody's kind of putting a spell on you or something. It feels a bit disorientating in a way. And I think that's really interesting because Ylang Ylang is something for me that I usually find in fragrances with jasmine. It's usually quite a bright note. It's usually sort of representing the sun to me in a way. And this fragrance is just not sunny in the slightest. It's not a bright fragrance at all. It's very deep and dark and almost sultry and something that almost feels a little bit gothic in a way. And really that gothic feel is continued in the rest of the fragrance because there's a little bit of a dusty cocoa, there's a really dark rose, and then there's a little bit of a patchouli note as well. And those just add to that gothic feel. They just make it feel even darker and even more seductive and even more appropriate for the wintertime. It's something that it needs to be ultra cold for it to shine through, and I think this fragrance would just be too much in the summer. I just love a dark fragrance, but it's definitely one to try rather than to blind buy. It's something that I think could be polarizing. It's not going to be a love for a lot of people. It's not a crowd pleasing fragrance. So that's Floristry Ylang Ylang Espresso. So the next fragrance to me represents those kind of nuts you get that have got that sugary coating on. I don't even know what they're called, but that's what I think of when I think of this fragrance. So this fragrance is Lattafa's Amir Al Oud Intense Oud. This fragrance is really a sugary vanilla fragrance with a touch of a nutty edge to it. It also has a little bit of leather to it and also a little bit of a peppery feel to me. This fragrance is really widely compared with By the Fireplace by Replica Fragrances, and I'd say that actually I ultimately prefer this one. I don't really like the smokiness that's in By the Fireplace. I find that very off-putting in that fragrance. And this doesn't have that. That's why I really much prefer this one. The end of last year I bought around, I think, 3 Lattafa fragrances, and I also bought an Afnan fragrance, and I'd say out of all those 4, this is definitely the one that I've reached for the most. This is the one that I return to. This is the one that I really enjoy out of those 4. This one is just the friendlier of the ones that I have. This is just a very light, woody oud. It's nothing scary, and it's just very sweet and easy to love, actually, this fragrance. And it's really not that expensive at all. I think I paid £10 for this fragrance. So that's Amir Al Oud Intense Oud by Lattafa. So the next fragrance is one from Théo Carbonel, and it represents cinnamon to me, so that's Café Carbonel. I think a lot of people think of this fragrance as more of a coffee fragrance, but for me the cinnamon is the more prominent note throughout most of the fragrance. In the opening of the fragrance, it really is all about cinnamon. It's all about a very gentle but warming cinnamon. It's really kind of a Christmassy smell to me. It's not powdery, it's not extreme, it's not spicy, it's just gently warming. Really something you want in the winter. As it dries, the coffee becomes more prominent, so the espresso kind of coffee smell comes out. And you also get a butteriness in the middle of the fragrance. I remember looking at the notes when I first tried this fragrance and thinking to myself, oh yeah, butter, I won't smell that. But you really, really do. And it's a sweet butteriness. It's almost a caramelised butteriness. I think the coffee in this fragrance is something that smells more like you're in a coffee shop and you're waiting to meet a friend or something and you haven't ordered yet. It's the smell of the coffee in the air. It's the smell of the coffee being roasted. It's the smell of the beans being ground. That kind of coffee smell. I think the butteriness also makes me think of pastries. It makes me think of, you know, when you're choosing a pastry and you're near the pastry counter. It really is a coffee shop in a fragrance. This one is really incredibly long lasting and is just the most beautiful gourmand fragrance. I think if you like cinnamon and coffee, you can't really go wrong. And it's just a very grown-up gourmand, this one. It's very elegant in a way. So that's Café Carbonel by Théo Carbonel. So this next fragrance represents a kind of caramel milkshake to me, and it's Cacharel's Yes I Am. I think I'm pushing the envelope slightly by describing it as a caramel milkshake, but we're going to stick with it for now. So I like this one mainly because of that caramel note, and I think the thing I like about the caramel in this fragrance is that it's not super screechy. It's not that really bad version of caramel that you get in fragrances generally, especially designer fragrances. Caramel to me in fragrance can be really off-putting. It can be headache-inducing. It can just be overly sweet. It can be cloying. It can be something that I just don't want to smell. I get that feeling a little bit in Bon Bon by Viktor and Rolf. That's just a bit too much, a bit screechy, a little bit high-pitched for me. This one is not like that. This one is more realistic caramel. And I think the thing that makes it more realistic is the fact that this fragrance is also milky in a way. So this really does have quite a gingery feeling in the beginning of the fragrance, and it's also got a bit of bergamot. But as it dries down, you get more of that raspberry, more of the caramel, more of the milk, and also some cardamom. And I think the cardamom is really critical to how this fragrance smells. It really stops it from going over the edge of being too sweet or too milky. I think the cardamom in this fragrance really makes me think of when my friend at work would make cardamom coffee, because he would boil up condensed milk and put cardamom in that condensed milk. And I think that condensed milk with cardamom is really what I smell in this fragrance with the caramel and with the milk note and with the cardamom. This fragrance is something that I really enjoy, but I rarely wear over the summer. It's something that I only really reach for in the winter. I started wearing this a couple of weeks ago, and I went to my friend's house and I just had a shower, I'd been staying overnight, and I came downstairs and I just sprayed this on, and I thought, wow, what is that? Something smells absolutely delicious. And I honestly didn't realise that it was my fragrance. It was Yes I Am. And I asked him, I said, are you wearing a fragrance? Because you smell absolutely delicious. And he said, no, Claire, that's you. So yeah, that's my embarrassing story about Yes I Am. So yeah, caramel milkshake. So this next fragrance represents cherries and honey to me, and it's Scandal by Night by Jean-Paul Gaultier. I've talked about this one a lot, so I'm not going to linger here, but this is a super sweet, sticky cherry fragrance that I honestly don't wear often enough. I think because I think it's a little bit inappropriate for work sometimes to be wearing this one. It's just a bit too sultry and sexy, this one. And yeah, this one has a tuberose note in it as well. And I think that's really what gives it that sexy oomph underneath the fragrance. I mean, cherries and honey are pretty sexy anyway, but that tuberose just takes it to another level, I think. So this one I ultimately prefer to Scandal, and I also very much prefer this fragrance to things like La Belle. I know La Belle was all over YouTube last year, and I've never got with that fragrance. This one I find absolutely intoxicating, absolutely delicious, and it's just my favourite out of the sticky sweet ones. So this is Scandal by Night by Jean-Paul Gaultier. So this next fragrance really represents chocolate and oranges. So can you all guess what it is? Yeah, it's the Scent for Her Private Accord by Hugo Boss. So this is truly a delicious fragrance, and I think people tend to talk about it as if it smells of terraced chocolate oranges. I don't really get that quite as much as I get sort of a cocoa dusted chocolate orange cream, almost like the ones out of the Quality Street tubs, if they still have the orange creams in them. I don't know whether they still do. That kind of thing. As this dries down, it sort of smells a bit more to me like an Amarula cream liqueur. It's somehow a little bit boozy, but also milky and fruity, which I don't really get from the notes. But anyway, that's how it smells to me. And yeah, this one is truly delicious, but sadly not very long lasting. So it tends to be one that I wear around the house or even to bed. So that's the Scent for Her Private Accord by Hugo Boss. So this next one reminds me of Coco Pops. Is that weird? I think that's a little bit weird. But yeah, it just really does. So this fragrance is one from Mancera, and it's Choco Violet. So yeah, it just reminds me of a dry bowl of Coco Pops. No milk, just really dry Coco Pops. So it's a very vanilla-y cocoa kind of fragrance, but it has that texture of Coco Pops. And I think that's really the Mancera signature musk in the background that's giving it that texture. There's also a slight nuttiness to this fragrance. It really reminds me of a dry piece of toast that you've kind of spread a very scant amount of Nutella on. It is very slightly nutty, but it's not overtly nutty. I think this fragrance is just weird. It's something that I can't quite believe that someone's made into a fragrance really. The other part of this fragrance is the violet, and clearly the violet here is noticeable, but I wouldn't say it's like at the level of something like Insolence, for example. It's something that's very much more background than that. And whilst the fragrance of the violets is very much like the Parma violets kind of smell, to me it's much more toned down than it is in Insolence. It's not as sweet as in Insolence or as fruity as in Insolence. It's more of a background kind of powdery violet smell rather than that sweet violet smell. I really like this fragrance, but I think it's very, very strange. And I just can't ever imagine me wearing it enough to actually warrant a bottle of this fragrance. But I do think it's incredibly distinctive, and it is just so intriguing. I just don't see what other reason there is for this fragrance to exist, apart from probably in very intimate moments when you just want your partner to smell you, because why would you want to smell the Cocoa Pops and Nutella otherwise? I just don't see the use for this fragrance other than that. So that's Choco Violet. It's delicious but weird. So the next fragrance reminds me of rice pudding, and it's L'Overdose Tattoo by Diesel. So this fragrance, I think it's long discontinued, but it still is available. I've seen it around. So this one is a beautiful custardy vanilla in the dry down, but it just takes some getting there. So in the opening, it's quite sharp and quite fruity, but also quite floral. So there's white florals here. There's also bergamot, and I think that's really what makes it quite so sharp and quite floral in the beginning. It takes a while to dry down, but when you get there, you get to this beautiful custardy vanilla kind of rice pudding kind of fragrance. If you want to smell like a Muller rice, one of those custard flavour Muller rices, this is the fragrance to do that with. It's not really a strong projector, it's more of an intimate fragrance. It's something that's more of a skin scent. It doesn't last that long, but I would say that it lasts longer than something like Red Kiss, for example, in the same range. And yeah, I think this is probably my favourite from the L'Overdose range. So that's L'Overdose Tattoo by Diesel. So that's the final fragrance in this video. I hope you've enjoyed it. If you have enjoyed it, then please press the like button, and please also consider subscribing if you haven't done already. And please let me know down below, what's your favourite Gourmand winter fragrance or your favourite Gourmand winter fragrance note? I'd be really interested to find out. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.